Almost all of the games in the Grand Theft Auto series have been exceptional, with each new release offering new features and improvements to the gameplay. However, the GTA Trilogy Edition has been a significant letdown compared to its predecessor games. This version, which includes GTA 3, GTA Vice City, and GTA San Andreas, has received mixed reviews, and for a good reason. One of the main issues with the GTA Trilogy Edition is its poor graphics. While the original games were released in the early 2000s, the Trilogy Edition's updated graphics failed to live up to expectations. The remastered graphics look outdated, and the game has a lot of visual glitches and bugs that can be very distracting. Another problem with the Trilogy Edition is the audio quality. The original soundtracks and voice acting were iconic, but in the new version, some songs have been removed due to licensing issues. The updated voice acting, although improved in some parts, falls short of the original performances. The Trilogy Edition also suffers from glitches and bugs that were not present in the original games. Players have reported issues with game crashes, frame rate drops, and game-breaking bugs that make it difficult to progress through the game. Moreover, the Trilogy Edition has a poorly optimized control scheme, which makes it challenging to play on modern consoles or PC setups. The controls are not intuitive and can be frustrating to master, especially for new players who are unfamiliar with the original games. Second on list is Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat Special Forces was a game that promised a lot, but ultimately failed to deliver. The game was a spin-off of the Mortal Kombat series, featuring a new protagonist, Jax Briggs, and a gameplay style that was very different from the fighting games that the series is known for. Unfortunately, the game was widely criticized for its poor design, lackluster combat, and overall lack of quality. One of the main issues with Mortal Kombat Special Forces was the controls. The game used a 3D perspective, which made the controls feel clunky and unintuitive. The camera angles were also poorly implemented, making it difficult to see where enemies were coming from and leading to frustrating deaths. Another issue with the game was its level design. The levels were poorly designed and lacked variety, making the game feel repetitive and dull. There were also numerous glitches and bugs that could cause the game to crash or freeze, which made it very difficult to progress through the game. The combat in Mortal Kombat Special Forces was also a major issue. The fighting mechanics were poorly implemented, with basic attacks and combos feeling unsatisfying, and the AI often feeling unresponsive. The game also lacked the brutal fatalities and finishing moves that the Mortal Kombat series is known for, which made the game feel like a generic action game rather than a Mortal Kombat spin-off. Next, let's move on to the Resident Evil. Umbrella Corps is a game that promised to be a unique and thrilling addition to the Resident Evil franchise, but in reality, it fell far short of expectations. The game attempted to blend third-person shooter mechanics with the iconic horror elements of Resident Evil, but instead resulted in a poorly executed, buggy mess that left fans of the series feeling disappointed. One of the main issues with Umbrella Corps is the lack of attention paid to the game's design. The maps are poorly constructed, with little variety, and often feel like they were designed for a mobile game rather than a full-fledged console game. The game's graphics are also mediocre at best, lacking the detailed environments and character models that are expected from a modern game. Another problem with Umbrella Corps is the lack of innovation in its gameplay. The game relies heavily on uninspired third-person shooting mechanics that feel generic and unsatisfying. The game's multiplayer mode also feels like an afterthought, with no real strategy or depth to keep players engaged. But perhaps the biggest issue with Umbrella Corps is the game's complete lack of any storyline or narrative. The game does very little to add to the Resident Evil universe, and instead feels like a cash grab, banking on the popularity of the franchise to sell copies. Overall, Umbrella Corps is a game that fails to deliver on its promises. It lacks depth, innovation, and a meaningful storyline, and ultimately feels like a game that was rushed out to capitalize on the franchise's popularity. As a fan of the Resident Evil series, I was deeply disappointed by this game, and I would not recommend it to anyone looking for a satisfying gaming experience. Sonic the Hedgehog has been a beloved video game character for decades, with many iterations of the series being fan favorites. Sonic Boom: Rise of Lyric was meant to be a bold new take on the series, with new characters and fresh gameplay, but ultimately, it failed to deliver. One of the main issues with Sonic Boom: Rise of Lyric is the game's clunky and uninspired gameplay. The controls are unresponsive, and the game is riddled with bugs that often make it unplayable. The levels are also poorly designed, with little variation in terrain, and lack the fast-paced action that the Sonic series is known for. The game's storyline is also lackluster, with a weak plot that fails to engage players. The new characters introduced in the game are forgettable and lack the charm and personality of the original Sonic characters. But perhaps the biggest disappointment in Sonic Boom: Rise of Lyric is the game's graphics. The game looks like a poorly made mobile game from the early 2000s, with low-resolution textures and blocky character models. The game's visuals are a stark contrast to the high-quality graphics that are expected from modern console games. Overall, Sonic Boom: Rise of Lyric is a game that fails to deliver on its promises. The clunky controls, poor level design, forgettable characters, and unappealing graphics make it one of the weakest entries in the Sonic the Hedgehog series. So that's it for today's video.